Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Thank you. Right. Steve opened this conference so beautifully in reminding us that we are truly a community. And as we work together, those who are new to the community, those who have been doing this work for decades, we recognize that we are part of a much broader community and, in fact, part of a much longer journey. So I'd like to spend these few minutes taking you on a bit of my journey and sharing with you some of the lessons and some of the moments along the way. Start back, roll back, 1987, June 16th. June 16th is the 11th anniversary of the day when in Soweto, South Africa, hundreds of students protesting peacefully were shot dead in the streets. And the anti-apartheid movement, of which many of us were part, is observing that date. And it is the broad, messy, multinational movement of workers, students, campuses, communities, faith-based institutions, and we have a special campaign to try and put economic pressure to end apartheid, not only through divestment, but other strategies that you have used all so well, shareholder engagement, also divestment protests, and we have a protest scheduled in front of Citibank as part of the campaign to cut bank ties to South Africa. So it's June 16th, and back at the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, headed then by Tim Smith, we call up National Public Radio because we would like them to cover our protest. And they say, you know, we've covered so many of these demonstrations, we just can't do anything with another demonstration until the bank does something. Thank you very much, we say. Go on working. An hour later, the phone rings. We pick it up. It's NPR. We thought you couldn't cover us until the bank did something, we said. Well, they say the bank has done something. The bank has just announced they're pulling out of South Africa. Our first lesson, learn from history, move with it. That afternoon, 1,000 people in front of the Citibank headquarters turned a demonstration into a celebration. Fast forward, 1994, another lesson from moving with history. South Africa elects Nelson Mandela as their first completely democratically elected president. Archbishop Tutu doesn't miss a beat with the quote that Steve gave us, that the end of apartheid was part one of the struggle, but part two, the more difficult, is to make the miracle endure. And he says, to repeat, we asked you to disinvest, now we say to you, invest, make South Africa succeed for the sake of the world. A street vendor named Lawrence Mavundla observes quietly, you know, political freedom without economic freedom is not freedom. And so many of us who were part of helping people get their money out look for a vehicle for putting it back in, but putting it back into the grassroots communities with whom we have been working for all of these years to help them make that change. And we formed Shared Interest, which is a guarantee fund whose main purpose as an investment fund where people can put their money is not to take that money and recycle it, but to get it to unlock money from South African banks to get them to lend to the 90% of the people in the country who, after all, should be some kind of a market. And we work with our partners in South Africa called the Timbani International Guarantee Fund to provide not only this access to local South African bank credit, but also technical support for beneficiaries and also for the banks. 2004, I'm in Limpopo province with my colleagues at Timbani, and we're visiting a microfinance institution called the Small Enterprise Foundation, SEF. And SEF is riotously successful. They have 18,000 rural women clients. They have a 99% repayment rate, but they can't get a bank loan. Their own bank won't lend to them. So we go with SEF to their bank and we offer the guarantee, and the bank says, but you know, who writes your letter of credit? And I say, well, it's written on Citibank. They say, well, then we must do a due diligence on Citibank. In those days, that wasn't funny. But I'm overwhelmed by the fact that I am jumping to the defense of Citibank. Oh, the irony of it all. And here I am trying to convince them, but my South African colleagues calm me down and give me a quick lesson in etiquette, South African banking etiquette. And we say, good idea. And when you have the results, do let us know what you found. Then we take SEF, we go to another bank. The bank with a guarantee takes one look at their financials, makes the loan with a guarantee, and several guarantees later, SEF has grown to an institution of 100,000 rural women clients, and they still have their 99% repayment rate. And their bank, the first one, wakes up and says, "But shame, you're our client. You should be banking with us." And they make them a loan without the guarantee. A couple of years later, 2007, it works, it does, it works. So another lesson from community, here we are in Mpumalanga province, practically on the Mozambican border, where a co-op of 214 black farmers is forming this co-op to grow sugarcane. They are on land where they have been dumped 50 years ago under apartheid by the white regime since they were living in a white area. They were picked up and dumped in the bush. Now, New South Africa, they're trying to make a successful enterprise out of this, and we have guaranteed a loan to make this co-op, help this co-op grow. We talked to the guy with the bicycle, Isaac Kosa, and I say to him, "Isaac, this is phenomenal. 50 hectares of sugarcane. Look at all this land that you've prepared. That's a really big job." Then I remember that I'm chair of the credit committee, and I ask my question, "So Isaac, have you had any big problems?" He goes, "Big problems?" I said, "Yes, big problems. This is a really big job. Have you had any big problems?" And he goes, "Mm-hmm." "Isaac," I said, "what kind of big problems have you had?" He goes, "Hippo." "Hippo," I said. "Yes," he said, "you see over there, the Komati River, 5 of them. They live in the Komati River. They come out. They love sugarcane. They munch the cane. And the worst is, when they drool, their saliva stunts the growth of the small plants." I'm trying to picture all of this. "Isaac," I said to him, "what do you do when you see hippo coming?" He looks at this ridiculous white woman. He goes, "Run." Now, I've chaired this credit committee, and I'm really proud of the fact that then, as now, we have never lost a cent of anybody's interest or principal. But I am quite sure that of all of the risk factors that we considered in evaluating this guarantee, drooling hippo was not one of them. So I go back to New York. Tembani digs in. With technical support, they figure out a solution to the hippo problem. And the next growing season, this co-op goes to the bank and gets a loan with no guarantee. Enter new countries, broader community. 2013, we've begun to recognize with South Africa that South Africa cannot succeed as an island of relative wealth in a sea of poverty. Neighboring countries so affected by apartheid are in devastated shape, including Mozambique, although it's growing rapidly now. 2013, we make a loan to an organization that works with communities like the community in Chokwe, pictured here on the screen. And picture this, early in 2013, a 7-foot wall of water cascades across where all of these families are farming and working, and it wipes out their homes, their harvests, their animals, everything. With the loan, they're able to drain the fields, make them environmentally sustainable so that they won't flood in the future, and replant. But I can't get over the emotional impact. And I ask the community, the woman with the hoe answers me the question. I say, "How did you find the strength after losing everything to come back and work here, plant again?" She said, "When I see my sister plant, I plant with her. And when I see my sister weed, I weed with her. And when there's a harvest, we all come. We never leave anyone alone." We have a lot to learn about that kind of community. 2013, the New South Africa has us evaluating where we are, and we recognize that much has been done, but much still needs to happen. Despite the incredibly enormous achievements of the New South Africa, we recognize that millions of South Africans now have access to housing, water, sanitation, free education, and yet they are still suffering from nearly half the people being in poverty, a 25% official unemployment rate that Goldman Sachs says is really closer to 36%, and a huge expansion of the population. A big percentage of the unemployed are youth. 40% of the people in the country have been born since Nelson Mandela was elected president. And so we understand the need to focus on the next generation. This work will take time. And so we make loans to organizations like the small company that is building schools in the Eastern Cape. This particular school, which has got 26 buildings, it's a campus, is going to be providing the first high school ever in the small town of Lusikisiki, which has never had a high school before. The kids in that area have to travel 20 kilometers to the nearest high school. When it's rainy, the bus breaks down, they don't get there. That means they fall behind, drop out. This school will make the difference for their futures. We also work with cooperatives in the Western Cape, and this cooperative, called Masilaki, which means let us build, is farming citrus and also grapes. And in August, I had the privilege of bumping along in the back of a truck with Zanelli and a couple of the other people who are working with her, and we are given a crash course in the cooperative's history. She tells us her history. She came 5 years ago at the age of 22 as a day laborer. And as a day laborer, she learned how to do all of the tasks in the fields. She is now, 5 years later, a supervisor. And as this project has been turned into a cooperative, she tells me proudly that for the first time, she can really think about her future. She is one of the owners of this farm. And so we know that this work continues, and as it continues, we are part of a much bigger community. We understand that in working with communities and in communities, we are not only working with partners across oceans, but also across generations. We stand with those who have gone before and with those who will come after us. And so I'd like to conclude with my very favorite South African proverb, which says, "The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now." Thank you.